Hello and welcome to a new season of the Scramble. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your new host, Sarah Montes de Oca. Today we will discuss the new economics of oil and the global implications of lower oil prices for countries around the world. We will also discuss the continued controversy of the anti-vaccine movement and its relation to the recent measles outbreak in California's Disneyland. Finally, we will discuss the increase in the technology industry in Las Vegas and Nevada at large. Is Las Vegas the next Silicon Valley? Before we open the floor for discussion, let me introduce our panel. Returning to the Scramble is James Schaefer, sophomore in journalism. We also have David Sarabian, a senior in political science. We also have two new people to the Scramble today, Hunter Terry, a recent UNLV graduate, and Jonathan Doc Bradley, a doctoral candidate in political science. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Oil prices have plunged recently, with gas prices reaching a low price of about $2 a gallon. This is good news for consumers in the United States, but countries like Venezuela and Russia have been hard hit as a result. Venezuela has recently received billions in loans from China in order to help with their already weak economy. Meanwhile, recent economic sanctions against Russia due to their actions in Ukraine have already worn down the Russian economy as the ruble continues to lose its value. What impact will these oil prices have on countries around the world, particularly Venezuela and Russia? So why don't we start with you, David? What do you think?
It's definitely going to affect the Venezuelan and Russian economies as it has so far. Venezuela is continuing to be hard hit, and they've sought out China to get even more billions of dollars in loans. And the previous loans that they had in years past they'd either already spent it or had already agreed to repay in oil shipments to China. And this is just creating an already worsening economic situation in Venezuela. With regard to Russia, it's certainly going to impact Russia, but Russia is moving towards having China as a main supplier of oil. Recently, Pravda, the state-run newspaper, stated that by 2018 they would have an open pipeline from Russia to China. Now, with Russia, it's certainly going to affect their economy, but I doubt that their people are going to want that much of change. Russians culturally, the dusha, the Russian word for soul, part of that is a suffering. As you saw in the Great Patriotic War, aka World War II, suffering, a hardship, is something that is almost an all-encompassing part of the Russian identity. And so people constantly say, they're going to throw Putin out, they're going to throw Putin out, they're going to throw Putin out. Probably not, just because of how much suffering and just how much of things like this, especially with the Russian internal propaganda machine going, that Russia's going to suffer, but not much is going to change politically. What
about you, Doc?
Well, to agree with David, Putin's going to be El Presidente for life. That's kind of an assumed thing. But there are some issues. First off, and I do a lot of China background studies, China and Russia doesn't play well together. And China has already maxed out its capacity to buy oil and natural gas. And they really do not want to be beholden to Russia. So there's some issues there. Europe is already doing its best to move away from the Russian supply. Russia right now greatly undersells natural gas products to Europe in order to propagate its own economy. But moving real quickly back to home, this lower gas prices here in the United States is a good thing, but only temporarily. Eventually, when the lower gas prices and lower fuel prices start to affect other commodities, then we start to see a depression of the economic generator. And secondly, part of our economic recovery over the last couple of years has been because of oil and natural gas exploration. You see the fracking, you see the increased wealth in North Dakota and South Dakota, going back towards oil and gas in Oklahoma, Texas. A lot of our economic generation has been generated on going after these resources. That's coming to an end. It is really expensive to get fracking materials. It is really expensive to get shale oil gas that we're getting in North Dakota. Continued low gas prices, and there's really no reason for them to do a massive upswing because Saudi Arabia is more than happy to play this game for a long time because they have enough cash reserves. Continued low fuel oil prices and gas oil prices is going to be detrimental to the worldwide, and it'll be detrimental to us quicker than rather later.
So because the Middle East kind of already has the cash, you think they're not really suffering like Russia and Venezuela?
Well, no, there's a difference between the Middle East and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has more than enough cash reserves. They have $1 trillion in RT bills. They have euros, they have everything. They can last this out. Iran, Syria, of course, in turmoil, what little production there is in the other Arabic states of the region, they can't outlast this. Saudi Arabia has always been kind of in control of OPEC, especially when it comes to Venezuelan stuff. Now they will be able, because they will outlast everybody else, they will be able to assume full control. And so even though it is detrimental to them right now for a deflated market, it's in the long run because they can get the U.S. production out of the way. Because all it takes is them to carry this on for another year, U.S. production to drop, and then they can come back in and jack up prices and re-insinuate the economic flow into them.
I think Doc has hit it right on the nose. I mean, this is going to, honestly, it's a very good analysis of it. But just like you said, this is only a temporary benefit for the United States. Unfortunately, or fortunately, gas prices are cyclical. I mean, just like coffee, gasoline comes in different blends, a winter blend and a summer blend. And when that winter blend comes in, it's much cheaper. That's why gas prices rise during the spring. Heating's much more expensive in the summer, and we've already, we all know this. But the domestic rise is also that of the shale companies and oil sands, I think it is. And that, although is a great thing for the United States, if we can touch back on Europe, is absolutely hurting countries like Poland right now. Chevron was going to have a deal when doing an oil sands project in Poland. And because of the booming projects in the United States, has completely cut off ties with many European nations looking to do shale oil sands. And because of that, has been hurting those European companies. E.ON, a UK gas company, has already started to cut production of certain oil production facilities in the hills in Middle England. And because of that, it's starting to show well, I guess back to what Doc said, certain countries are able to outlast this than others. One of the greatest examples is Saudi Arabia. And if I could touch back on China with Venezuela, that's what China is, and you have a background in China. China is getting the most out of this right now. Currently, China, like you said, was putting in those loans for Venezuela, but they're also doing the same loans for Nigeria and for Ecuador. Also, they began construction projects in Algeria and Angola and had a 400% increase of Chinese and UAE trade, United Arab Emirates. All these nations share one thing in common. They're all OPEC partners. If China can't have friends, they will buy friends. And currently, some of those nations are starting to hurt more than others. Saudi Arabia, not more than others, but those other nations are starting to look for financial assistance. Currently in Venezuela, the gas is 4 cents. Well, they're not able to afford certain basic goods like toilet paper or batteries.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's because gasoline is heavily subsidized. There are so many goods in the Venezuelan economy, from appliances to gasoline to food, that are heavily subsidized by the government. Not to mention petrol.
From the oil revenue.
From the oil revenue, which was something around 40% of the GDP of Venezuela evaporated almost overnight. And even before, when gas prices were at $100 a barrel, $110 a barrel, Venezuela, the government still didn't have their stuff together.
And if I can add one quick, and I'll try to keep this brief not to monopolize the conversation. We have to remember that the reason oil became king in the world was because there was a switchover by the British Navy in around 1910 to go from coal to oil. And that literally was the huge dynamic shift that the entire world switched to oil.
So it's all England's fault.
Well, yeah, always. But anyway, we were seeing that again. We were seeing a massive switch to natural gas. Natural gas is cleaner burning. We have been able to obtain it, get it quicker. But now, Saudi Arabia doesn't have the natural gas reserves that it has of the light sweet crude. Saudi Arabia has about 40 years of really clean oil that they can get at very easily. And if the world switches over to natural gas, Saudi Arabia loses its foothold.
Sure.
And then the last thing I want to say is, the big winner in all this, it's not us, it's China.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's finish, with
I think
Hunter
that
here.
right now, domestically, it is definitely going to be a problem for a lot of the shale producers. You've got to get in there. And right now, I think it said that you can lose production under the course of a 60 to 70% drop in just the first year. And so after a year of these prices, they have to think, are we going to reinvest money finding new sources? And they know where they are, and they're not too hard to get at, but it's a big investment. Most of these companies run at a deficit. They run under large amounts of debt. And if the prices stay this low, many of them can, I think it's around $70 a barrel. Many of them can afford this right now, but much lower, it'll put a lot out of business. And even if it stays here for a year, it'll start to put some out of business. And that's going to make the stronger companies, the ones that have better resources, that are more established, that have the infrastructure set in place, they'll be able to succeed longer and hold out, and that should put them in a better position to rebound once prices do come back up. And when they do come back up, there'll be less companies in the market because so many of the ones that were on more fat will have fallen off because they weren't prepared for this kind of drop.
Well, if you want to add one more thing, and then we'll move on to
I'm
our
going to add
next
one more
topic.
thing. I just want to say, since China is the biggest winner out of all this, I'd like to also touch on who I think is the loser in all this, and it's definitely Russia. Currently, they've lost their grasp of European oil and have fallen back on a deal to make a pipeline to Turkey. I mean, their options are either take all the millions in dollars they have and fluctuate it to rubles so they can increase the cost of the ruble, or go back to the IMF, which is made of the same nations that is putting sanctions on it, and ask for money. So Russia is in a bind. The rest of the world is just kind of going through the punches.
Well, we'll see what circumstances and consequences it brings both nationally and internationally. Moving on to our next topic, the recent outbreak of the measles virus across the United States has infected over 94 people in 8 different states. 67 of those cases have been linked to Disneyland in California. This is another example of a once eradicated virus making a comeback in the United States. How many of these cases could have been prevented, and how did the anti-vaccine movement play a role, if any, in this recent outbreak? So who wants to start? James, go ahead.
For me, I am very much for vaccines, and anyone that says that there is a vaccine debate is like saying to me there's a debate on if the world is round. I mean, it is provable, and there is no scientific evidence for the latter. And something I want to distinguish with this conversation that we're about to have is, although we like to label people like Jenny McCarthy, who is a big proponent of the anti-vaccine movement, we should also notice people that are part of the informed choice movement. Although anti-vaccine has the celebrity on The View in the next couple days and all that good stuff, we should also look at people that are for informed choice. Parents that are not pressured by their doctors to go to their pediatricians and see if there's been any sort of allergic reactions to any of the chemicals or any of the ingredients in those vaccines. And there have been cases with parents not being informed, not being pressured by the doctor, giving their child the vaccine and having some sort of allergic reaction. That is the fault of the parent for not going through every precaution, but it is at some extent the fault of the doctor. So if anything, I think we take from this debate, I think that vaccines are good, but we all should be informed to the greatest extent when vaccinating our children. I mean, heck, the first round of vaccines for children above the age of, 3 is 6 shots? So, I mean, if you're going to be putting that much stuff in your kid, you should have at least some sort of information and not just trust the doctor to the greatest extent.
Ooh, I want to respond to that.
Okay. Go ahead. Let's hear from you.
A couple quick issues. First off, as someone who has adored Jenny McCarthy for years, I'm going to somewhat defend her in that she's getting this ugly rap on this, and she has espoused this idea and this viewpoint. But let's remember, she's a D-list celebrity that has 2 claims to fame. A game show on MTV back when MTV actually showed music.
Didn't even know she had that.
Yeah, which is when I fell in love with her Playboy pictorial. So it's not so much on her advocating this position, it's that people are saying, oh, Jenny McCarthy is a credible source. So I think that we kind of need to get away from that and get back to the idea of doctors.
Yes.
The problem with the doctors and vaccines and the measles outbreak now is because there's no cultural memory of measles. I'm older than everyone here on the panel. I'm 44. I've never seen measles. I knew that my parents had it, that my parents' friends had it, and that some of the people they knew died. But I am 1 generation removed. So most of you are probably close to the age which would be my children, which depresses the heck out of me. But you have no memory whatsoever of these diseases. Like polio, I have no concept. I think I've seen 1 person in my life that was affected by polio. I have no concept of it. So it's not so much that the doctors, and they might need to start being more active in it, it's that we've had a cultural ideology of going through industrialization of trusting in the system. So we trusted in the doctors because the doctors said, do this, it'll prevent that, which you know of. Now, we've got a distrust in the system of everybody because it's a post-industrialist or postmodernist idea. And so now we can look at someone like Jenny McCarthy and say, well, she's an expert because she's just like me. Well, no, she's not an expert, and neither are any of us, or neither are any of you. But we don't have this cultural memory of these diseases. So this is one of the things that happens in a post-industrialist society. And it's starting to happen all over the world. These people who become more individualized and do not have to adhere to government. They don't think they have to adhere to what the government says is good for them because they have a distrust in the government. It's going to continue on until we change this dynamic. And the worst thing about it is, so even though you have these anti-vaccine people who are wrong, categorically wrong, they will not admit wrong because first off, you're saying they have to admit that they were wrong in parenting their own children, which nobody ever wants to admit. So not only and I'll give you this, that we need to be more proactive in this, but we also need to, as a group, accept some guilt. I mean, we just don't have this memory anymore.
Well, like you said, given that we don't have the cultural background or familiarity with these diseases, well, Hunter, what do you think? Do you think that people, these anti-vaccine campaigns, I mean, a lot of people are defending that they think it's poison to even get these vaccines when, I mean, what are we trying to get at? What are we trying to fight?
I think that these guys have covered it. I mean, saying that this is a real debate this debate makes the climate change debate look really easy. In climate change, you've got 98 to 2%, and that's being generous. And this, it's not even that. It's proven over and over again. I feel like every 3 or 4 years, it's debunked again and again, and everyone immediately forgets it was debunked and treats it like it's maybe at least a reasonable debate. Vaccines work. They work to, I think, 90% about. Before these things, measles killed 1 out of every 100 cases, I believe, and there's 500,000 cases a year. We're freaking out because there's 70, out of Disneyland. And it's bad. And we're going to see a death soon if those numbers hold true. Yeah. And we've already seen deaths and other things where the vaccines have been pulled back. And it's not safe. It's a public health epidemic that could be much worse if we don't do something. And I think that expecting parents to find out about all these things, even if they ask, what are the threats here? What are the chemicals in this? Again, they're not experts, and they're not going to know what these chemicals might actually threaten you. What is the percentage of a milligram in that particular dose, and how dangerous is that particular dose of that? That's a lot to expect from a parent. I think the doctors need to be very proactive. We need to be one-on-one with parents, let them know this is ridiculous. This is how it is. This is how effective it is. This is how safe it is, and this is the track record. Because information or forcing people through law is the only way to make sure it happens. And we're not going to do the latter, hopefully. So information, I think, is the way to go.
And I just want to say on that, saying parents are experts, because when parents are informed by the doctors and they go to the internet, unfortunately, the only degree they get is a degree in Google University.
Yeah, but to defend parents, every parent is an expert in their own child.
Sure.
And I mean, as much as I want to scream, you guys don't know what you're doing, I don't have children.
Right.
And so I completely am disvalued. So I think for me, and to hear both sides of the argument, I think we need to reestablish trust between the medical establishment and parents, just to have trust in each other. I mean, the difficulty with measles, and we'll see this is, Ebola's been the high buzzword. Ebola is very deadly, but it is not very communicable. It is hard to catch Ebola. Measles is 90%. If one of us has it, 3 other people here are going to catch it. If you're not inoculated.
I think that's exactly what causes the outrage. I mean, like you said, I don't have a kid. But if I were to put myself in the shoes of a parent, which is very difficult for me to get in the mindset of, I think one of the first things I'd be upset about is if my child was going to a public school with someone who hadn't gotten the shot. Yeah. And I'd be outraged because of that. I wouldn't be thinking about, the parents very, looking out for their child. Oh, the parents, worried about the doctor. Oh, the parents worried about their kid. I don't care about the parent. I care about my kid. So
that's their same argument for not doing it. I care about my kid.
Right.
And I've even actually heard one argument that says I didn't need to inoculate my child because everybody else was
But one side of the argument has scientific proof and experts, and the other side has people that think they have scientific proof and think they're experts.
Well, that's a post-industrialist society.
David, what do you think?
So to kind of wrap it up is that you have a lot of parents who have this mentality, and sometimes you see this in college students, is I think therefore I'm right. And they have this attitude of, I think that because I looked this up, because I found it on one blog post, because I discovered this information for myself, that somehow it has some type of weight. When there is this age of the internet where where a lot of people are willing to do a little bit of research, but then not in-depth enough to say, look at the footnotes. They'll read a few summaries of some idea that was probably just repeated 2 or 3 times because those 3 people that they just read repeated the first one that everybody just read. And so people need to look more in depth at things. And there's a point at which people's ignorance of medical issues they just decide, I'm not really going to look into this, but I think I'm going to be right.
Right. They'll look for the answers they're looking for and find the answer. And unfortunately, the internet only speaks in one medium, and it's "can I has vaccine."
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll see what this controversial topic leads to in the near future. Stay with us. We'll take a short break.
In 1977, an 8-year-old boy picked up the game of golf from his father. The odds of that same boy then making it to the US and European Pro Golf Tours, 1 in 7 million. The odds of the Big Easy winning the US Open twice, 1 in 1.2 billion. The odds of him having a child diagnosed with autism, 1 in 88. Ernie Els encourages you to learn the signs of autism.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. Got it. No.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Thank you for staying with us. So Governor Sandoval stated that the data company Switch will allot $2 million to build 4.5 million square feet of additional warehouse space in Las Vegas and Reno, which according to the governor will make Nevada the most digitally connected state in the U.S. With Tesla Motors' plan to build a factory in Nevada, is Las Vegas poised to be the next Silicon Valley? Or will Nevada be enabled to attract more technology firms? What do you think, David? We'll start with you.
I think the Silicon Valley aspect of it is, we're nothing close to Silicon Valley right now, but of course there's potential if we can keep attracting Tesla and Switch and companies like that. It's a long ways to go, but unless Nevada can continue to pull those people in, then it's a long ways off. But this is a nice start.
James, what do you think?
I think one of the greatest things that makes this state and this city better than Silicon Valley is our state lawmakers. I mean, one of the biggest things of why Silicon Valley will die and is going to be the next Detroit is because of things like, I'm serious, because things like their state lawmakers are not going the extra mile for those companies. Do you know who does? Las Vegas. Who was the first state that got Tesla here in order to sell cars straight to the public? Because in Texas, they wouldn't allow that. They had to have a dealership. Our state lawmakers made it so that Tesla was able to sell directly to the consumer. Google driverless cars. They're driven here in Las Vegas. Why? Because state lawmakers made it so that we were the first state to issue a license for those automated cars. And last but not least, Apple. Apple in Reno houses millions upon millions of dollars in Reno, because we have a zero corporate tax rate. Companies will move here and have been moving here for quite some time because we have the lawmakers that will go that extra mile for those companies. No one else, no other state, no other city will do that. Only in Vegas.
I think that the laws are definitely very friendly. It
Yeah.
helps bring a lot of things here. And the infrastructure we have as far as digital connectivity is really impressive. But one things I was reading that I think is really striking is the lack of higher education options in the area. We have two major league universities in the entire state.
One. Us.
No, you're not.
No,
Take that, Reno.
Reno Community College doesn't count.
Reno's numbers as far as rankings are atrocious, no matter what they say.
They won't
I
watch us,
just
will
mean
they?
that we have two large-scale universities that you could hope to rely on for educating your populations. And in California, you've got dozens and dozens. And it's like Virginia on the East Coast and New York. A lot of states have great facilities all over the place. We have much less of that. And it's going to be hard to produce the employees they need to staff these things without bringing the people in. And you can only import so many.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be one of the biggest hurdles for us to overcome.
Well, when you think Las Vegas, we don't always think education, do we? But definitely we'll see what kind of technological advances it brings. What do you think, John?
I think everything that everybody said about the lawmakers being good and our infrastructure being good, but one of the things that is missing here that's actually hurt, and it hurt with Zappos, it's one of the things that they've been complaining about, is we don't have the cultural infrastructure. Vegas is just finally starting to develop any sort of a cultural identity. And when I first moved here in 2006, one of the things I missed most was the fact that there is no cultural center here. And when you look at the Research Triangle Parkway in North Carolina, or you look at the Electronics Parkway outside of Dallas, or you look at Silicon Valley, one of the things that the workers like, the actual workers like, is the fact that they like living there. They like the stuff they can do. When we talk about Tesla coming in, that's a factory job. This is not a high-end educated job. So when you're bringing in this data information storage area and you're bringing in this higher level of workers, master's degrees, PhDs, they want to be part of a town that has more than gambling. They want museums, they want the civic, they want East Fremont to expand, they want that out. To the credit of City of Las Vegas as opposed to Resort Quarter, they're putting investment in that, but it's very shaky. Until we can actually create, this is the millennial generation, which most of you belong, is you see this influx back into the inner cities. You see these people moving out of the burbs back because they want to be part of that culture. You can go to New York City. 20 years ago when I was a kid, or when I was younger in New York City, you didn't live in Manhattan because it was a death fest. Now, it's an awesome place to be because they're recreating. They have to do that here because you can lure them in with every tax incentive, but unless an employer can say to their workers, hey, we're going to Vegas, and they go, yay, instead of, oh God, I'm going to spend my paycheck in the frickin' casino, then it's not going to work.
Well, who knows? It could happen. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Share your opinions and any ideas or topics you would like us to scramble about to thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also watch full episodes of The Scramble at UNLV-TV. For all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.